On that frozen morning, he woke up to emptiness. His mate had vanished without a trace. The alpha of the mountain was broken. But months later, a mysterious healer arrived, carrying forbidden knowledge, and a past strong enough to bring even the fiercest leader to his knees. Evelyn's scream pierced the morning silence as she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. 3 jagged marks ran down her left forearm, dark and raised like claw marks, but she had no memory of how they got there. The sight made her stomach lurch, not just from the grotesque appearance, but from the way her mouth watered at the metallic scent of dried blood. She stumbled backward, her hip striking the marble countertop hard enough to bruise. This couldn't be happening. Not to her, not to someone who lived such a carefully controlled, predictable life. Evelyn Harper, 24 years old, head librarian of the Thornwick Mountain Library, keeper of ancient texts and forgotten stories. She was supposed to be ordinary, safe, invisible. Her hands trembled as she reached for the faucet, desperate to wash away whatever nightmare had visited her sleep. The cold water stung against the wounds, but instead of relief, a surge of something primal and hungry shot through her veins. She gripped the porcelain sink so hard, her knuckles went white, fighting against an overwhelming urge to hunt, to chase, to taste fresh meat between her teeth. "What's wrong with me?" she whispered to her pale reflection. Her green eyes, usually soft and contemplative, seemed brighter somehow, almost luminous in the dim bathroom light. She blinked hard, hoping it was just her imagination, but the strange glow remained. The walk to work felt different that morning. Every scent seemed amplified, the pine needles crushing under her boots, the distant wood smoke from someone's chimney, even the fierce sweat of a squirrel 50 yards away. Evelyn pressed her palm against her forehead, wondering if she was coming down with some strange flu. That had to be it, some kind of fever making her senses go haywire. Thornwick nestled in a valley between 2 towering mountain ranges, perpetually shrouded in mist that rolled down from the peaks like ghostly fingers. The town had maybe 800 residents, most of whom had lived there for generations. Evelyn loved the isolation, the way the mountains seemed to protect their small community from the chaos of the outside world. Here, surrounded by towering pines and ancient stones, she felt safe, or at least she had until this morning. The library sat at the heart of the village square, a Victorian building of dark stone and tall windows that had served the community for over a century. Evelyn climbed the worn steps slowly, still shaken by her morning discovery. She needed normalcy, routine, the familiar comfort of dusty books and quiet corners. "Morning, dear," called Mrs. Hartwell from behind the circulation desk. The elderly woman had been the head librarian for 30 years before passing the torch to Evelyn 2 years ago. Now, she volunteered most days, unable to completely let go of the place that had been her life's work. "You look pale. Everything all right?" "Just tired," Evelyn lied, pulling her cardigan sleeves down to cover the marks on her arm. "I didn't sleep well." Mrs. Hartwell's grey eyes studied her with the sharp intelligence that had made her such an effective librarian. "Have you been having those dreams again?" Evelyn's breath caught. She had never told anyone about the dreams, the recurring nightmares of running through dark forests, of howling that seemed to come from her own throat, of golden eyes watching her from the shadows. What dreams? The ones that make you cry out in your sleep. Your neighbor Mrs. Chen mentioned she's been hearing you through the walls. Heat flooded Evelyn's cheeks. Her small apartment above the bakery wasn't particularly soundproof, but she hadn't realized her nightmares had been loud enough to disturb others. "I'll look into getting some sleeping pills." Mrs. Hartwell nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Perhaps you should speak with your grandmother about them first. Lydia might have some insights." Before Evelyn could ask what she meant by that cryptic comment, the bell above the library door chimed. A man entered, and every instinct in Evelyn's body went on high alert. He was tall, probably 6'3", with broad shoulders and an athletic build that suggested both strength and predatory grace. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and his skin had the kind of tan that came from spending significant time outdoors. But it was his eyes that made her heart race, golden amber, like liquid fire, and so intense she felt exposed under their gaze. "Can I help you?" she managed, her voice coming out smaller than intended. "I hope so." His voice was deep, with a slight rasp that sent shivers down her spine. "I'm looking for information about the local wildlife patterns, specifically wolf populations in the surrounding mountains." Evelyn's pulse hammered in her throat. Wolves? There haven't been wolves in these mountains for decades. They were hunted to extinction in this region back in the 1940s. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or disappointment. "Are you certain about that?" "Of course I'm certain. I've lived here my entire life, and I've studied the local ecology extensively." She gestured toward the reference section. "We have detailed records going back to the town's founding in 1887. No wolf sightings have been reported in over 80 years. The stranger took a step closer, and Evelyn caught his scent. Pine, leather, and something wild and untamed that made her head spin. "What's your name?" "Evelyn," she answered without thinking, then immediately regretted revealing personal information to this unsettling stranger. "Evelyn." He repeated her name slowly, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I'm Adrian Blackwood." "Mrs." Hartwell made a small, sharp sound from behind the desk. When Evelyn glanced over, the older woman was staring at Adrian with wide, frightened eyes. "Blackwood," Mrs. Hartwell whispered. "You're one of them." "One of who?" Evelyn asked, confusion mixing with growing unease. Adrian's golden eyes never left Evelyn's face. "Mrs. Hartwell knows exactly who I am. Don't you, Martha?" The use of Mrs. Hartwell's first name, spoken with such casual familiarity, sent ice through Evelyn's veins. How did this stranger know the elderly librarian? "You shouldn't be here," Mrs. Hartwell said, her voice trembling. "Especially not now, not with her. With me." Evelyn looked between them, feeling like she was missing crucial pieces of a conversation. "What are you talking about?" Adrian smiled, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of teeth that seemed slightly too sharp. "Tell me, Evelyn, have you been experiencing anything unusual lately? Changes in your appetite, perhaps? Heightened senses? Vivid dreams?" The marks on her arm began to throb as if responding to his words. Evelyn backed away until she hit the reference desk. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The scent of fresh blood makes your mouth water," Adrian continued, taking another step toward her. "You can hear conversations 3 blocks away. And last night you had the most realistic dream yet, running through the forest on 4 legs, feeling more alive and free than you ever have in human form." "Stop." Evelyn's voice cracked. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I know exactly what you are, Evelyn Harper." Adrian's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and the air around him seemed to shimmer with barely contained power. "The question is, do you want to keep pretending you're human, or are you ready to embrace what you've always been?" Mrs. Hartwell stepped out from behind the desk, positioning herself between Evelyn and Adrian. Despite her small stature, there was something fierce and protective in her posture. "Leave her alone, Adrian. She's not ready for this." "She's 24 years old, Martha. How much longer do you plan to keep her in the dark? The suppressants won't work much longer. Her wolf is already breaking through." "Suppressants?" Evelyn felt the room tilt around her. "What suppressants?" Mrs. Hartwell's shoulders sagged in defeat. "The tea, dear. The special blend I've been giving you since you were 16. It was meant to keep your wolf dormant until you were old enough to handle the truth." The world seemed to collapse around Evelyn. 8 years. For 8 years, someone had been drugging her without her knowledge, suppressing something fundamental about her nature. "You've been poisoning me?" "Not poisoning," Mrs. Hartwell said quickly. "Protecting. Your grandmother asked me to watch over you, to keep you safe until—" "My grandmother is dead." Evelyn's voice rose to near shouting. "She died when I was 6. "Your grandmother, Lydia, is very much alive," Adrian said softly. And she's been waiting a very long time to see you again." The room spun. Evelyn gripped the edge of the desk, fighting waves of dizziness and nausea. Everything she thought she knew about her life was crumbling. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 4. That's what she'd always been told. She'd been raised by her grandmother until the woman's death when Evelyn was 6, then shuffled through a series of foster homes until she aged out of the system at 18. She'd fought so hard to build a stable, quiet life in Thornwick. She'd thought she finally had control, finally had peace. "I don't believe you," she whispered. Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, ornate silver locket. The moment Evelyn saw it, her heart clenched with recognition. She'd seen it in her dreams, worn by a woman with her same green eyes and copper hair. "She wanted me to give you this," Adrian said, holding out the locket. "She said you'd remember." With shaking hands, Evelyn took the necklace. The silver felt warm against her palm, and when she opened it, she found 2 photographs. One showed a woman who looked exactly like an older version of herself, and the other showed a little girl, herself at maybe 4 years old, sitting on the woman's lap. "Grandmother Lydia," she breathed, memory flooding back like a dam bursting, not dead, hidden, protected. But from what? "Your parents didn't die in a car accident, Evelyn," Adrian continued, his voice gentler now. "They were killed, murdered by hunters who discovered what they were. Your grandmother faked your parents' deaths and her own to keep you safe. She's been living in exile ever since, waiting for the day your wolf would emerge so you could be reunited." "Hunters?" Evelyn's voice was barely audible. "People who know about our kind and want us dead. They've been getting bolder lately, more organized. Your grandmother believes they've found her trail." Adrian's golden eyes darkened. "Which means they'll find you soon too, unless you come with me." "Our kind?" Evelyn repeated, though part of her already knew the answer. "We're werewolves, Evelyn, shapeshifters, and you're not just any werewolf. You're something much rarer, something they'll kill to possess or destroy." The marks on her arm burned, and suddenly Evelyn understood. The dreams, the strange urges, the way she'd always felt different, like she was pretending to be human rather than actually being human. It all made terrible, perfect sense. "I need air," she gasped, pushing past both Adrian and Mrs. Hartwell toward the door. "I need to think." "Evelyn, wait," Adrian started after her. "Don't follow me," she called over her shoulder, her voice carrying more authority than she knew she possessed. To her surprise, Adrian stopped, his expression shifting to something that looked almost like respect. She stumbled out into the crisp mountain air, her mind reeling. Werewolves, hunters, a living grandmother who'd let her believe she was orphaned. 8 years of being secretly drugged to suppress her true nature, and Adrian Blackwood, with his golden eyes and dangerous smile, offering her a truth that would destroy the careful life she'd built. But as she stood there in the town square, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of Thornwick, she realized something that terrified her more than any revelation about werewolves or hunters. For the first time in years, she felt truly awake. The marks on her arm had stopped hurting and started tingling with anticipation. Her senses were sharper, her reflexes quicker, her entire body humming with energy she'd never experienced before. Whatever Adrian Blackwood had awakened in her, there was no going back to sleep. The only question now was whether she had the courage to discover what she really was, or if she'd spend the rest of her life running from a truth that was already changing her from the inside out. But as she stood there, trying to make sense of everything, she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the surrounding mountains, something was watching her, waiting. And whatever happened next would change everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. Evelyn didn't go home that night. Instead, she found herself climbing the narrow trail that led to the old watchtower on Raven's Peak, a crumbling stone structure that had been abandoned for decades. She needed height, distance, perspective. She needed to think without Adrian Blackwood's intoxicating scent clouding her judgment or Mrs. Hartwell's guilty eyes, making her question everything she'd ever believed. The climb should have been exhausting. The trail was steep and treacherous, barely more than a goat path winding through dense pine forest. But Evelyn moved with an ease that startled her, her feet finding purchase on loose rocks without hesitation, her lungs barely working harder despite the altitude. When she reached the watchtower just as the sun was setting, she wasn't even winded. From the top of the ancient stone structure, she could see the entire valley spread below her like a living map. Thornwick's lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, peaceful and innocent. But now she found herself scanning the tree line with predatory intensity, her enhanced vision picking out movement in the shadows that should have been invisible in the fading light. A wolf howled in the distance, long and mournful, and Evelyn's entire body responded. Her spine straightened, her head tilted to catch the sound more clearly, and something deep in her chest wanted to answer. The urge was so strong she actually opened her mouth before catching herself. Beautiful, isn't it? Adrian's voice came from behind her, soft and non-threatening. The first time you hear your own kind calling. Evelyn spun around, her heart hammering. She hadn't heard him approach, which should have been impossible given her newly sharp senses. How did you find me? I followed your scent. Adrian stepped out of the shadows at the base of the watchtower, moonlight catching the silver threads in his dark hair. And you left quite a trail. When your wolf is this close to the surface, you might as well be broadcasting your location to every supernatural creature within 50 miles. Every supernatural creature. Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she intended. How many of you are there? More than you might think. Fewer than there used to be. Adrian began climbing the external stone steps that spiraled up the tower's exterior. The hunters have been busy for the past century. Systematic, efficient. They've driven most of our kind into deep hiding or extinction. When he reached the top, Evelyn instinctively backed away, but there wasn't much space on the narrow platform. Adrian seemed to sense her discomfort and stopped several feet away, his hands visible and non-threatening. You don't have to be afraid of me, he said quietly. Don't I? Evelyn challenged. You show up in my library spouting impossible things. You somehow know intimate details about my dreams and my body that no stranger should know, and now you're telling me I'm some kind of mythical creature that hunters want to kill. Exactly what part of this situation should make me feel safe? Adrian's smile was rueful. When you put it like that, I suppose fear is the rational response. He leaned against the stone parapet, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. But you're not feeling rational right now, are you? You're feeling alive for the first time in years. You're feeling like you finally fit in your own skin. He was right, and that terrified her more than anything else. Despite the impossibility of everything he'd told her, despite the upheaval of her entire worldview, she felt more like herself than she ever had. The constant low-level anxiety that had plagued her for years was gone. The sense of being slightly disconnected from her own body had vanished. Even her chronic insomnia seemed to have disappeared. She felt energized and alert, despite having slept poorly. The suppressants, Mrs. Hartwell gave you was slowly poisoning your wolf, Adrian continued, seeming to read her thoughts. That's why you felt tired, anxious, disconnected for so long. Your human side and your wolf side have been at war, with the human side artificially boosted by chemical intervention. Now that the suppressants are wearing off, you're finally experiencing what it feels like to be whole. How do you know so much about me? Evelyn demanded. About the suppressants? About my grandmother? About any of this? Because I've been looking for you for 3 years. Adrian's admission hung in the air between them like a challenge. Your grandmother sent me to find you when the hunters started getting close to her hiding place. She knew your 21st birthday would trigger the first changes, and she wanted me to be nearby when your wolf finally emerged. My 21st birthday was 3 years ago. And the dreams started getting worse around then, didn't they? The insomnia intensified. You started having unexplained injuries that healed unusually fast. Small things at first, but getting progressively stronger as your wolf fought against the suppressants. Every word he spoke rang true, and that scared her more than outright lies would have. Why you? Why did my grandmother choose you to find me? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the forest below. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested painful history. Because I know what it's like to lose everything to the hunters. They killed my entire pack when I was 16. Parents, siblings, extended family, everyone except me. I was away at the time, learning from another pack how to control my abilities. When I came home, there was nothing left but ashes and blood. The raw pain in his voice made Evelyn's chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. I'm sorry. Your grandmother found me afterward, half wild with grief and rage. She helped me learn to channel that rage into something useful. She taught me how to hunt the hunters, how to protect other wolves from suffering the same fate as my family. Adrian's golden eyes met hers. She also told me about her granddaughter, hidden away and suppressed, who would one day need protection. I've been honored to watch over you from a distance, even if you didn't know I was there. Watching over me from a distance. Evelyn's voice rose. You've been stalking me? Protecting you, Adrian corrected firmly. Do you remember the hiking accident you had 2 summers ago, when you fell off the cliff trail and somehow walked away with only minor scrapes? Evelyn nodded slowly. She'd never been able to explain how she'd survived that fall with so little injury. The drop should have killed her, or at least broken multiple bones. You didn't walk away uninjured because you were lucky. You walked away because your wolf healing kicked in, and because I carried you 3 miles to safety while you were unconscious. Adrian's eyes grew distant with the memory. You shifted partially during the trauma. For about 10 minutes you were more wolf than human. It was beautiful and terrifying. I shifted? The words came out as barely a whisper. Partially. Your bones reinforced themselves to absorb the impact. Your healing accelerated. Your senses sharpened enough to detect the safest path down even while unconscious. Then the suppressants kicked back in and forced you back to human form. Adrian stepped closer, his voice growing urgent. But that incident proved your wolf was growing stronger. The suppressants couldn't hold much longer. That's when your grandmother told me to make direct contact. Why didn't you approach me then? Why wait until now? Because 2 weeks ago, the hunters found your grandmother. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She gripped the stone parapet to keep from swaying. She escaped, but barely. And not without cost. Adrian's expression darkened. They tortured her before she managed to break free. She's alive, but injured, hiding in a safe house about 2 hours from here. Relief and terror warred in Evelyn's chest. Her grandmother was alive, but in danger because of her. We have to help her. We will. But first, you need to understand what you're up against. Adrian moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The hunters aren't just random fanatics anymore. They're organized, well-funded, and they have access to weapons and techniques specifically designed to kill our kind. Silver bullets are just the beginning. They have tranquilizers that can paralyze a werewolf in human or wolf form, nets that burn on contact with our skin, and tracking methods that can follow our scent for days. How do you know all this? Because I've been hunting them for 8 years. Adrian's smile was sharp and predatory. I've learned their methods, their weaknesses, their organizational structure. And I've killed enough of them to know they take our existence very personally. The casual way he spoke about killing sent a shiver through Evelyn. This man, this wolf, was dangerous in ways she was only beginning to understand. But instead of fear, she felt a dark thrill of anticipation. The suppressed part of her that had always felt too tame, too civilized, too controlled, was finally beginning to understand its true nature. What do they want with me specifically? she asked. "You're not just any werewolf, Evelyn. Your bloodline is special, rare." Adrian's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter in the darkness. "You're what we call a true Luna, a female alpha capable of uniting multiple packs under one leadership. There haven't been more than a dozen true Lunas in recorded history." "Alpha?" Evelyn laughed, but it came out brittle and disbelieving. "I'm a librarian who's afraid of confrontation. I've never led anything more challenging than a book club." "That's because you've been suppressed for 8 years. The real you, the wolf you, is nothing like the meek human persona you've been forced to maintain." Adrian took another step closer, now near enough to touch. "In your dreams, when you run through the forest, how do you feel?" "Free," Evelyn answered without thinking. "Powerful, like I could tear apart anything that stood in my way. That's your true nature. That's the alpha the hunters want to capture or kill before you can come into your full power." Adrian's voice dropped to an intimate murmur. "And that's the woman your grandmother has been protecting all these years." The space between them crackled with tension. Evelyn could feel Adrian's presence like a physical force, drawing her closer despite every rational thought screaming at her to maintain distance. His scent, pine and leather and something wild, made her head spin and her pulse race. "I can teach you," he said softly, "how to shift safely, how to fight, how to use your alpha abilities to protect yourself and others, how to be the true Luna you were born to be." "And what do you get out of it?" Evelyn's voice came out huskier than intended. Adrian's smile was slow and dangerous. "I get to serve a true Luna again. I get to be part of a pack instead of a lone wolf slowly going insane from isolation." His golden eyes held hers. "And maybe, if I'm very lucky, I get to protect someone worth dying for." The intensity in his voice made Evelyn's breath catch. She took a step back, needing space to think clearly. "This is all happening too fast. Yesterday I was a normal human being with a quiet life. Now you're telling me I'm some kind of supernatural royalty destined to lead werewolf armies against organized hunters. Yesterday you were a suppressed wolf, slowly dying in a human cage," Adrian corrected gently. "Today you have the chance to become who you were always meant to be." Another howl echoed through the valley, closer this time, and Evelyn's body responded instantly. Her muscles tensed, her senses sharpened, and every instinct screamed at her to answer the call. This time she didn't fight it. She tilted her head back and released a sound that was part human cry, part wolf howl, carrying all her confusion and longing and desperate need to belong somewhere. The forest went silent for a moment, then erupted in response. Dozens of howls answered hers from all directions, some distant, some shockingly close. The sound raised goosebumps along her arms and sent electricity racing through her veins. "They hear you," Adrian said, wonder creeping into his voice. "Even suppressed, even untrained, your call carries alpha authority. They can sense what you are." "How many?" Evelyn's voice was breathless. "At least 30, maybe more." Adrian's expression grew serious. "That's good and bad. Good because it means you have potential allies nearby. Bad because if we can sense them, the hunters probably can too." As if summoned by his words, a new sound reached them from the valley below. The distant rumble of multiple vehicles moving fast along the mountain roads. Adrian's entire body went rigid, his nostrils flaring as he scented the night air. "We need to go," he said urgently. "Now! What is it?" "Hunters. At least 6 vehicles, maybe more. They're converging on Thornwick from multiple directions." Adrian grabbed her hand, his skin burning hot against hers. "They heard your call, and they know exactly what it means." Before Evelyn could protest, Adrian was pulling her toward the stairs, but instead of descending the way they'd come up, he led her to the other side of the tower, where a steep slope dropped away into dense forest. "We can't go back to town," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "They'll have roadblocks up within minutes, and they'll definitely be watching your apartment. My things are replaceable. Your life isn't. Adrian squeezed her hand. Trust me, Evelyn, I know this is terrifying, but if you want to live long enough to see your grandmother again, you need to trust me right now. Below them, the first flickers of searchlights appeared among the trees near Thornwick. They were moving in a coordinated pattern, systematic and thorough, professional. How did they find me so fast? The same way I did. Your untrained alpha call was like sending up a flare. Adrian's golden eyes met hers in the moonlight. But that also means you're finally strong enough to learn how to protect yourself. The question is, are you ready to stop running from what you are and start fighting for it? The searchlights were getting closer, and Evelyn could hear the distant sound of doors slamming, voices shouting orders. Whatever choice she made in the next few seconds would determine not just her immediate survival, but the entire trajectory of her life. She looked at Adrian, this dangerous, beautiful stranger who claimed to know her better than she knew herself. Then she looked at the lights below, representing people who wanted to hunt her like an animal for the crime of existing. The choice, when it came down to it, was surprisingly easy. "Teach me," she said. Adrian's smile was fierce and proud. "Hold on tight." Before she could ask what he meant, he wrapped his arms around her and leaped off the watchtower into the darkness below. The fall should have killed them both. 40 feet of empty air, jagged rocks waiting below, gravity pulling them toward certain death. But Adrian's body began changing mid-fall, his bones extending and reshaping, thick fur erupting across his skin as he shifted into something between human and wolf. His powerful arms cradled Evelyn against his chest as his transformed legs absorbed the impact with inhuman grace. They landed in a crouch among the pine trees, silent as shadows. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, but she wasn't hurt, not even bruised. Adrian had taken the full force of the landing, protecting her completely. "How did you—" she began, but Adrian pressed a finger to her lips. "Later," he whispered, his voice rougher now, more animal. "They have thermal scopes and sound equipment. We need to move." Even in the moonlight, Evelyn could see that Adrian's face had changed during the shift. His features were sharper, more angular, his golden eyes now reflecting light like a predator's. His canine teeth had elongated into something that was definitely not human. But instead of being terrified, she found herself fascinated by the raw power emanating from his transformed state. They moved through the forest with Adrian leading, his partially shifted form allowing him to navigate the dense undergrowth with supernatural speed and silence. Evelyn followed, surprised to find that her own senses had sharpened enough to avoid branches and roots that should have been invisible in the darkness. Her wolf was learning, adapting, even without conscious effort. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Voices calling coordinates, the mechanical whine of all-terrain vehicles, and something else, the deep baying of hunting hounds that made every hair on Evelyn's body stand on end. "Tracker dogs," she whispered. "Worse," Adrian replied grimly. "Those aren't dogs. They're hunter-bred hellhounds, specifically designed to hunt supernatural prey. They can follow our scent even after we shift, and their bite carries venom that prevents werewolf healing." A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air ran down Evelyn's spine. "How many people want me dead?" "More than you can imagine, but also fewer than there used to be." Adrian paused, listening to something she couldn't hear. "This way. There's a safe house about 2 miles ahead." They ran. Not the desperate, panicked flight Evelyn had expected, but something fluid and predatory that felt like dancing with the darkness. Her body moved with an efficiency she'd never experienced, every step perfectly placed, every breath measured and controlled. The wolf inside her was finally awake, and it was magnificent. 20 minutes later, they emerged into a small clearing where a cabin sat nestled against the mountainside. It looked rustic and abandoned from the outside, but Adrian led her to a hidden entrance carved into the rock face behind the structure. The tunnel beyond was lit by modern LED strips and lined with what looked like advanced security equipment. "Safe house," Adrian explained, noting her surprise. "Your grandmother established this network 30 years ago. Hidden refuges throughout the mountain ranges, connected by tunnels, and supplied with everything we need to survive extended sieges." The tunnel opened into a surprisingly spacious underground facility. Solar panels and battery banks lined one wall, while another held weapons racks filled with modified crossbows, silver-tipped arrows, and other equipment Evelyn didn't recognize. But what drew her attention was the figure sitting at a computer workstation in the center of the space. "Evelyn?" The woman turned, and Evelyn's breath caught. Same green eyes, same copper hair, now streaked with silver, same elegant bone structure. But where Evelyn remembered a gentle grandmother who baked cookies and told bedtime stories, this woman radiated deadly competence. "Grandmother Lydia?" Evelyn's voice cracked with emotion. "You're really alive." "Very much so, dear one." Lydia rose gracefully, despite the bandages visible beneath her tactical clothing. "Though I apologize for the deception, it was the only way to keep you safe." Evelyn crossed the space in 3 quick strides and wrapped her arms around the woman who had raised her. Lydia felt smaller than she remembered, more fragile, but her embrace was exactly as warm and comforting as Evelyn's childhood memories. "I thought I was alone," Evelyn whispered against her grandmother's shoulder. "All these years, I thought everyone was gone." "Never alone," Lydia murmured, stroking Evelyn's hair. "Always protected, always loved, even from a distance." She pulled back to study Evelyn's face. "Adrian tells me your wolf has finally emerged. How do you feel?" "Confused, terrified, angry." Evelyn's honesty surprised her, "but also more alive than I've ever been." Lydia's smile was proud and sad at the same time. "That's exactly how your mother felt during her first transformation. You have her spirit, her strength." "Tell me about them," Evelyn said urgently. "About my parents, about what really happened." Lydia's expression grew pained. "Your parents were Marcus and Elena Blackthorn. Marcus was the alpha of the Thornwick Pack. Elena was his chosen mate and a healer of extraordinary ability. They were young, idealistic, and convinced they could find a way for our kind to coexist peacefully with humans. Blackthorn?" Evelyn's mind raced. "But my name is Harper. We changed it when we faked your death, along with theirs. Harper was your mother's maiden name." Lydia moved to the computer workstation and pulled up what looked like family photos. "Your parents were trying to establish diplomatic contact with human authorities. They believed that secrecy was what made humans fear us, that education and openness could bridge the gap between our species." The photos showed a young couple who looked exactly like older versions of Evelyn. Marcus had her same copper hair and stubborn chin, while Elena shared her green eyes and delicate features. They looked happy, confident, completely unaware of the danger they were walking into. "They were betrayed," Adrian said quietly from behind her. "Someone they trusted gave their location to a hunter organization called the Silver Cross. The hunters came at dawn, when the pack was at its most vulnerable." "The entire pack?" Evelyn's voice was barely audible. 43 werewolves, Lydia confirmed, her voice heavy with old grief. "Men, women, children, all killed within an hour. Your parents died protecting the nursery, trying to give the youngest ones time to escape. But I survived. You weren't there." Lydia's fingers traced one of the photos tenderly. "Elena had been having prophetic dreams about the attack for weeks. She was a seer as well as a healer. She could perceive future threats to the pack. She sent you to me 3 days before the massacre, claiming you needed to visit your grandmother." The weight of it crashed over Evelyn like a tidal wave. Her parents had died saving others, had sent her away to protect her, even though it meant they would face their death without their child. And she had been too young to remember, too suppressed to even mourn them properly. "The Silver Cross has been hunting our bloodline ever since," Adrian added. "They believe true Lunas are too dangerous to exist." They've spent 20 years tracking down every potential descendant of the Blackthorn line. But they found you, Evelyn said to her grandmother. 2 weeks ago. Lydia nodded grimly. I got careless. After watching you for so long, seeing you grow into such a remarkable woman despite the suppressants, I wanted to get closer. I took too many risks, left too many traces. She showed Evelyn the bandages on her arms, which Evelyn now realized were covering silver burns. They had me for 6 hours before I managed to escape. How many of them are there? The Silver Cross, at least 200 active hunters worldwide, with support networks that triple that number. Lydia pulled up what looked like surveillance photos on the computer screen, but they've committed most of their resources to this operation. They have nearly 50 hunters in the area right now. 50 trained killers against 3 werewolves, Evelyn said flatly. Those aren't good odds. Actually, they're better than you think. Adrian moved to stand beside her, his presence both comforting and electric. Remember those howls that answered your call? Word has been spreading through the supernatural community for months that a true Luna was about to emerge. We're not alone. As if summoned by his words, a new voice spoke from the tunnel entrance. No, you're definitely not alone. Evelyn spun to see a woman entering the safe house. She was tall and athletic, with short-cropped black hair and eyes like chips of ice. But what made Evelyn's breath catch was the aura of power radiating from the newcomer, almost as strong as Adrian's, but with a different flavor. Where Adrian felt like barely contained wildness, this woman felt like controlled lightning. Evelyn, meet Cassandra Nightshade, Lydia said. Alpha of the Northern Range Pack and my oldest friend. Former Alpha, Cassandra corrected with a slight smile. I stepped down 3 months ago when we got word that the true Luna was finally awakening. My pack and I have been waiting to serve. Serve? Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. I don't know the first thing about leading anyone. You knew enough to call the pack together with your first conscious howl, Cassandra pointed out. You knew enough to trust Adrian when every human instinct was screaming at you to run. And you knew enough to come here instead of trying to face this alone. Her ice-blue eyes held Evelyn steadily. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about making the right choices when everything is at stake. Speaking of which, Adrian said, moving to a weapons rack, we need to make some choices now. The hunters will find this location eventually. We can either wait for them to come to us, or we can take the fight to them. How many wolves answered my call? Evelyn asked. 63, from 7 different packs, Cassandra replied. More are arriving every hour. Word is spreading that the true Luna has finally come into her power. 63 wolves against 50 hunters. For the first time since this nightmare began, the odds didn't seem completely impossible. But Evelyn found herself thinking of Mrs. Artwell, of her small apartment above the bakery, of the quiet life she'd built in Thornwick. What about the humans? She asked. The innocent people who don't know about any of this. The hunters won't hesitate to kill them if they get in the way, Adrian said grimly. They consider human casualties acceptable losses in their war against us. Then we make sure they don't get the chance. Evelyn surprised herself with the steel in her voice. How long before the packs can be in position? 2 hours, Cassandra said. Maybe less. And the hunters? They're setting up a perimeter around Thornwick now, Lydia reported from the computer. They'll probably wait until dawn to make their move. They prefer to attack when our powers are at their weakest. Then we don't give them the chance to wait. Evelyn moved to the weapons rack, her hands closing around a crossbow with disturbing familiarity. We hit them now, while they're still organizing. Evelyn, Lydia said carefully, you've never been in combat. You've never even transformed fully. This isn't something you can learn in an evening. Maybe not. Evelyn met her grandmother's eyes steadily. But I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting other people die to protect me. She looked around the room at the 3 faces watching her with varying degrees of hope and concern. My parents died fighting for what they believed in. If I'm going to be this true Luna everyone keeps talking about, then it's time I started acting like one." Adrian's smile was fierce and proud. "What do you need from us?" "Everything you can teach me in the next hour about being a wolf. Everything you know about hunter tactics and weaknesses, and a plan that doesn't end with half the pack dead." Evelyn's voice grew stronger with each word. "If they want a war, we'll give them one. But we'll fight it on our terms, not theirs." The next hour passed in a blur of intensive training. Adrian taught her the basics of partial transformation, how to extend her claws, sharpen her senses, and tap into her wolf's strength without losing her human intelligence. Cassandra showed her pack dynamics and combat formations. Lydia filled her in on Silver Cross methods and vulnerabilities. But the most important lesson came when Evelyn attempted her first full transformation. Standing in a reinforced training chamber, surrounded by people who believed in her, she finally stopped fighting the wolf inside her and let it emerge. The change was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Power flowed through her like liquid fire as her body stretched and reformed. Her senses exploded into hypersensitivity as she became something magnificent and deadly. When the transformation was complete, she stood 7 feet tall in her hybrid form, copper fur rippling over muscles that hummed with supernatural strength. "Incredible," Cassandra breathed. "I've never seen a transformation that clean on a first attempt." In her wolf form, Evelyn could sense things that had been invisible to her human perception. The pack bonds connecting her to every wolf in the region, thrumming with loyalty and anticipation. The fear and determination radiating from her companions. And something else, a darkness spreading across the mountain like a stain, carrying the scent of silver and hatred and death. "They're moving," she growled, her voice deeper and more resonant in this form. "We need to go." The final battle began at midnight, under a full moon that seemed to smile down on the chaos below. Evelyn led 63 wolves in a coordinated assault that struck the hunter positions from 6 directions simultaneously. She fought with instincts older than civilization, with strength that could shatter bones and speed that made her nearly invisible. But the hunters were prepared too. Silver nets dropped from helicopters, tranquilizer darts whistled through the air, and hellhounds bayed as they were released to hunt the pack. The battle was brutal and desperate, with losses on both sides. In the end, it came down to Evelyn facing the Silver Cross commander in single combat, while the fight raged around them. He was everything she had expected, cold, ruthless, utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He had killed her parents, had tortured her grandmother, had spent 20 years hunting her family to extinction. When she finally stood over his defeated form, her claws at his throat, she felt no satisfaction, only a terrible certainty that this cycle of violence would continue until someone chose to break it. "It's over," she told him, her wolf voice carrying across the battlefield. "Surrender your people, leave our territory, and never return. Or I will finish what you started 20 years ago." The choice he made in that moment determined not just the outcome of the battle, but the kind of leader Evelyn would become. When he called for his forces to retreat, when he looked into her golden eyes and saw not a monster but a protector, she realized that her parents' dream of coexistence might not have died with them after all. As dawn broke over the mountains, Evelyn stood with Adrian and watched the last of the hunter vehicles disappear down the mountain roads. Around them, the pack tended to their wounded and celebrated their victory. But she felt no triumph, only the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a mantle. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you build something new," Adrian said softly. "A pack that includes both wolves and humans who can be trusted. A community that honors the old ways while embracing new possibilities. A future where children like you don't have to grow up thinking they're alone." Evelyn nodded, her hand finding his. The journey ahead would be difficult, dangerous, probably impossible. But as she felt the pack bonds humming with hope and determination, as she sensed new wolves arriving each day to join their cause, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by family she had chosen and a love that had chosen her in return. The true Luna had finally come home.